So, welcome back, fellow fanatics. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about The Who with special guest musicians Jake Gabbard and Patrick Weiland. Hope you enjoy. Well, actually, before we even get started, Jake and Paul, or Pat, sorry, Pat. Paul, Pat. I don't know where I came up with Paul.
He's been called worse.
I have.
Any like, is it okay if I call you guys Jake and Pat, or do you guys want something different? Or
Yeah, Pat's good.
You can call me the King.
The King?
Or Sir. No, I'm kidding. Jake is fine.
Jesus.
All right.
Don't call him that.
Okay, cool. You know what? I might start the episode on that one because that was a good joke. All right. But yeah, so I was preparing for this one, and I wish like I said before, I wish I could have more of like a wide angle on what you got going on in the background, Jake, because you have a whole bunch of Who posters, and that's what the episode is about, The Who.
Yeah, of course.
But I also got a bunch of links from you, from both yourself and Pat, and I have to say, I like the stuff that you guys put out. I really enjoyed the content that you guys created with your music and the music video as well.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah, I think the two music videos was the Who cover of man, I'm trying to
Boris
remember
the Spider.
Boris the Spider.
Yep.
And then the music video with the Howlers, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Right. Yeah, so it was pretty cool. Also, Pat's funk band. Is that
Yeah.
what was the name of the funk band again?
It's the Fantastic Elastic YOLO Band.
The Fantastic Elastic YOLO Band. I have to say that album cover is probably one of the best album covers I have ever seen in my life.
Thanks, man. I was pretty happy with it.
Yeah,
That's Pat, on the cover.
No,
That's
not
pretty
me.
impressive, Pat. Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of girls that would like to know that workout routine that you're doing.
I love it.
Yeah. But tell me a little bit about yourselves. How'd you guys meet? Like, how'd you guys get into The Who, and how'd you guys start playing music?
Yeah, sure. Pat, you want to start or you want me to start?
So how did I start playing music first, and then how did I meet Jake?
Yeah, sure. However you
Okay.
want.
Chronologically.
So I started as a youngin' in the mid-'90s. I started playing drums first, and then eventually learned guitar, bass, a little bit of keys, and then some recording stuff as well. But yeah, so I've been doing that for quite a while. And then I met Jake actually just a couple years ago through a musician friend of mine, because I was looking to do some music videos for my band, Lazy Genius.
Hell yeah.
So yeah, that's how I met Jake, through a musician friend. And when we started hanging out together, I think I saw his back, like his main screen of his computer was like a picture of The Who from like the early 70s.
Yep.
And then we immediately hit it off after that. It was like, it's like a million conversations we can have now. So yeah, but yeah, I guess that's about it. A very quick way to go about it.
Yeah. So I don't think I need to cover meeting Pat because that's already been done. But for me, getting into music, it started off when I was really little, like literally from the age of 3, I started taking violin lessons. And I liked it, but I wasn't super into it. And by the time I got like into near middle school age, it was like, no, I can't do this anymore. I'm not liking violin. I'm not enjoying this. And then in 2006, my dad took the whole family and we all went to see The Who, because I was already into The Who in a big way at that time. And watching Townsend play guitar all night, it was like, forget it, I'm done with violin. And I never touched the violin again. And I switched to guitar, like within a month, I was taking guitar lessons. And been playing guitar ever since.
Okay, so not too rough of a transition, at least. You
No,
go
no,
from little strings to big strings.
Right. Go from 4 strings to 6. That was a little
Yeah.
bit to get my head around, but
Yeah, I got you. Got you. Ben, so why the Who, guys? What is it about this band that draws you guys in so much?
So for me, the first thing from the Who I ever heard was when I was really little. They were my dad's favorite band, but my mom made this Halloween mixtape back in the 90s where it was like, you hold the recorder up to the radio when a song you like comes on, kind of a thing. And one of the songs on this Halloween mixtape she did was Boris the Spider. And I really liked that song. So then, fast forward a few years, I was like 6 or 7. My parents got me a record player for Christmas, a little Fisher-Price one. And I took it upstairs and I was digging through my dad's vinyl. And I came across this album called Meaty, Beady, Big and Bouncy, which the name just was hilarious to me as a 6 or 7-year-old. And I was reading the back of it, and one of the tracks on that album is Boris the Spider. And I was like, hey, I know this song. So I listened to that album, and I loved it. There was also I'm a Boy is on there, which is also a funny song to a little kid, and Happy Jack. And my dad heard me listening to The Who, and then in '04, the album Then and Now came out, which was kind of a compilation album, so he got me that on CD, and my love for The Who just exploded from there, and I've been into them ever since.
So yeah, for me, like the through point would definitely be through Keith Moon. When I was sort of learning the drums and getting interested in drummers and things, a lot of people I liked were kind of older bands and drummers. So I kind of got into him basically off of Keith Moon and just kind of how notorious he was as a rock star and everything. But yeah, it kind of started with that, but then I gradually came to kind of listen to all their stuff and then just kind of get an idea what the band was like, and I grew to kind of love like the songwriting and the whole band itself. I think one of the things that has always sort of stuck with me about that band is they could only really exist in that time frame, in that nowadays everything is very sequenced. There's a lot of like click tracks for recording. A lot of people do things remotely, and the way that this band works, they really, when they were firing on all cylinders, it was because of the situations back then, whereas like you had to play live, and that was really all you had. That was, and it seems like every member of the band, at least the musicians, and sometimes Roger the singer, but they're all playing a solo. Mm-hmm. Depending on what part of the song it is, but they all are flashy solo players, and it's almost like this is a really weird thing, but it's almost like you can kind of track it when you watch it. You can kind of see like which member of the band is kind of bouncing between each other, who's the most busy or insane at one point in time. But I guess just that dynamic, it's only specifically with those 4 people. I mean, they can pull it off with people now with parts that are already written. But as far as, it's just, it's really hard to replace any member of that band. And if you look at their history, you can see they kind of stumbled, specifically when Keith passed away.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what I love about it, is it's like a specific spot in time, and just a specific chemistry, just those people. It could only have been those people,
Yeah, I was always really into with The Who was they had a different sound to me, where Townsend's writing can be so delicate and sensitive, and yet The Who can just also sound so angry and over the top. And, that just the juxtaposition of those two things coming together was always really fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I kind of feel like I've been listening to The Who a lot this week, trying to wrap my head around who the band is, why they're so special. And yeah. I've always thought they were special just because, man, I wish I remember what movie it was, but there's a movie that it either closes or opens with Bubba O'Reilly, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like just that, I think their music is very theatrical. So just the way that their music layers very well with like a lot of TV and like movies and stuff. Like I was looking at the credits and I'm like, there's no way that their songs are only on like this paragraph full of of shows and movies. I'm like, they've been all over the place, right? They've influenced so many people. So I kind of knew the Who just from media. Also, like they did a Super Bowl one year, right?
Yep, 2010.
I thought it was a freaking phenomenal show, Like,
yeah.
I love rock music and stuff like that. So
that was my favorite halftime show. Not that I'm biased or anything.
I can't tell by looking at your screen there at all.
It wasn't the Justin Timberlake, Janet Jackson one.
That one will always have a special place in my heart. But
yeah, different reasons.
Yeah. But what I was kind of getting at is I kind of got the sense that they were almost like the first emo band before emo was even a thing.
That's not completely wrong. I guess it would depend. Yeah, I mean, I can't argue with that.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't heard people say the emo specifically, but I have heard people say that a lot of punk music stemmed out of the Who.
Yeah.
And same with metal stemmed out of the Who too.
Emo came from punk.
Yeah.
Emo came from punk. Well, I thought it was cool. So there's a couple things that I noticed from other music bands, like British rock bands, right? They have a lot of
British Invasion, you mean?
Yeah, the British Invasion, right? So, but they have like a lot of similarities, or I should say, other bands have similarities to them. Like for example, Led Zeppelin, right, with like Jimmy Page being in a skiffle band, Roger being in a skiffle band, right, and then that kind of like evolving into rock groups, right?
Yeah.
And then also they're like boyhood or schoolboy friends. Right, they all kind of like were in the same neighborhood, like, hey, or like same thing with the Beatles. Hey,
right.
I know you play music, let's go ahead and start a band, and that kind of felt like the working class thing to do,
right.
to entertain yourself in that time in the UK.
Yeah,
yeah, but also they were into what's called mod culture, which I find that fascinating because that was like hipster punks, right? Really well-dressed hipster punks before punks were even a thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think how much do you think like current fashion trends and stuff like that affected them and like their group and stuff like that?
So are you asking like how much the mod scene at the time affected the Who? Was that the question?
Right.
So my understanding was that was Kit Lambert's doing. Kit was their manager at the time. And my understanding was he came to them one day and said, you guys are going to be a mod band now. And basically said, you're going to dress like this, and this is what your logos are going to look like. And it worked. The mod culture really got behind them, and they kind of exploded because of that. He was a genius.
Yeah, it's kind of like the two are very, very, very intertwined. Obviously, you can see the poster behind Jake there. That's like legit mod era Who going on back there. And yeah, I mean, it was like the two are very intertwined. And then, one of their later record, or not later, but somewhat later, Quadrophenia is basically like Pete's sort of love letter to the mod peeps and everybody, because they were all they came up through that. So yeah, that was definitely a big part of their early career, specifically, I'd say.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And as far as you guys with your music, is there any scene that like has influenced you guys, or like a group of friends that like maybe were labeled a certain way?
I guess sort of like growing up in the 90s, there was like a thing like noise bands or no wave, just a lot of weird younger kids that I played shows with in the 90s. Just kind of doing their own thing, just kind of off the wall, not even necessarily trying to make it like a pop song or this or that, just being really weird and jamming with friends, I guess. And when we were younger too, my band, Lazy Genius, we used to have a thing where we would bring like a VHS TV combo to shows, and we would show like Toxic Avenger or something weird on there, and we would make popcorn, and we had like a weird machine where we rigged it up where Silly String would shoot at us. So a lot of friends back then, a lot of it was like about the show too, but in our own poor way to do it, you know. But yeah, I don't know. That's the best I can come up with that question, I guess.
Got you. Jake, did you have a scene that influenced you at all?
Again, The Who.
The Who?
That was my thing. Was I was very resistant to people my age growing up. I don't know why. I just was. So I mainly stuck to British Invasion, Woodstock era. That's like where my headspace was. And I guess it's good because I like who I am, but at the same time, nobody I went to school with was into that. That was way too old for them. So again, that's why I ended up playing guitar in my bedroom for 10 years, whereas Pat was in bands the whole time, you know?
Well, I mean, I will say, like, Jake and I, you know, we're very specific in that same way, where it's like, yeah, I mean, my main influences, like, I was a little bit into, like, the 90s, like, alt-rock, you know what I mean? That would be, like, the closest early thing I identified with, but I stopped, you know, listening to mainstream radio on the regular in the, you know, late 90s, because I started digging around looking for older cool stuff, and that just appealed to me more. I just like guitar bands, rock bands, and so it's a combination of friends bands in town that I know, or bands that I've played with that I know, and then classic rock. But yeah, it's just kind of a mishmash of all that, and I always kind of go and try to look for older cool stuff and dig around and look for new. Not necessarily like, you know, top 40 stuff, but cool stuff that's current, you know? I guess that's always been a dichotomy for me.
Yeah, and I think I get what you're saying, because I really don't listen to much radio as much anymore. And it is hard to find when you are listening to something that doesn't sound like it's been done before. Or something that is, you know, genuinely cool because it's its own thing, because everybody sounds like everybody, you know,
right
nowadays. But The Who is definitely one of those people that kind of broke the mold, because at first I think they sounded like the Beatles. There's a song of theirs when they were called the High Numbers, I Am Face or something like that.
I'm the Face?
Yeah, I'm a Face. To me, that sounded like a Beatles record.
The Face. I'm the Face.
Yeah, I'm the Face.
I'm
yeah,
the
no,
Face.
for sure.
Yeah. It sounded like a Beatles record, which when I was watching the documentaries, I think Keith Moon said that his very first drum kit was a Ringo kit. And I don't know if that had anything to do at all with, you know, Ringo from the Beatles. But if it did, then they must have been greatly influenced by them. But eventually they kind of broke out into their own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's like, if you listen to like the Kinks, you're gonna get even more early Who ripoff vibes.
Yeah,
they're very, very intertwined in sounds. Yeah. And one of the first Who singles too, and forgive me for being nerdy or whatever, but one of the, Can't Explain, that Who single, Jimmy Page plays leads on that, doesn't he, Jake?
Yeah, he plays lead guitar on that song. Townsend recorded a lead, and their manager, Kit, didn't like it, so they brought in a session musician who just happened to be Jimmy Page.
Yeah.
That is pretty
cool. And then the Who gave Led Zeppelin their name. I can't remember if it was John Entwistle, the bass player.
It was Keith.
But okay, yeah. So somebody,
Jimmy Page tried to steal Keith Moon to be the drummer for Led Zeppelin, and it didn't go well.
I could have sworn that it was Entwistle was heard about the idea for the band, and it said he was gonna go down like a Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, it might have been Entwistle. It was one of them.
This is nerdy classic rock talk. This is what you gotta expect from us.
No, that's awesome though. That is something that I did not know, and that's kind of crazy that those two legendary bands kind of coincided with each other, or ran around with each other.
That's Keith Moon was best friends with Ringo, or one of his best friends was Ringo from the Beatles.
Really?
In fact, Keith was godfather to Ringo's son Zach, and Zach is now the drummer for the Who currently.
Yeah.
Right.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Yeah. And Keith Moon is like such an iconic character. Like you want to talk about your quintessential rocker. I mean,
I mean, a lot of the stereotypical rock star stories are based on things that Keith did. You know, he lived fast and he lived hard. There's a reason he only made it to 32.
Yeah, which kind of blew my mind away that he died at 32, because that's like the age I am right now, and I'm like, I can't imagine partying so hard that I just like die from swallowing handfuls of pills. And I don't know, dude was crazy. But I think the way that his not origin story, but the way he joined the Who was so cool.
The gingerbread man. Yeah.
Right. He like tried to dye his hair like a Beach Boy. And
the Beach Boys were his favorite band. He loved surf rock.
Oh yeah, surf rock. That's a whole other topic. I love surf rock, like Dick Dale and all that stuff. Like I thought that was really cool when I was trying to learn to play guitar. That's kind of like what I was trying to learn, but I failed at it miserably. But that's a whole other topic. But I thought it was awesome that you had this energetic drummer that they say that it's the only band that like you would be like watching the drummer, because the guy is just going so hard at the drum kit. And I think they said that he broke the bass pedal and 2 drum heads the very first show, and then they're like, we got to have him. Like there's no other drummer for us.
Yes.
Coming from a drummer's perspective, like when I started playing back in the day, I would play along to albums with headphones on, right? And so I would listen to, like Nirvana, which was fun to play along with, a lot of 90s stuff and then classic rock stuff. And when I got into The Who, I was like trying to play along to the album Kids Are All Right. And if I'm not mistaken, it's somewhat in a chronological order, that record is.
Yeah, I think so.
So, I'm playing along with, and I'll be very meticulous when I'm listening to something, really picking it apart, trying to get all the little bits and bobs right, on the kick drum, snare drum, hi-hats. But when I came to playing along to Keith's thing, it's like, man, if you really try to like pick that apart and like write down and like remember every little specific hit and fill and whatever, you're gonna lose your mind.
Yeah.
Because it's literally like he's drumming like somebody would write something on a page. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. There's not really it's just all kind of, and that's kind of how the band is. It's very almost jazz in a way.
Yeah.
But he's an amazing drummer. It's just nobody is really like how he was.
Yeah. There's a great part in the documentary Amazing Journey from The Who where Roger isolates, I think it's on Behind Blue Eyes, he isolates the drum track and the vocal track to show that Keith he wasn't just keeping beat, which is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to keep time. But Keith wouldn't. He would play specifically to the melody. So what ends up happening is you can have a complete song with just the melody and the drums. Which then led to the style of The Who, because then John Entwistle had to evolve the bass to kind of keep time, but also fill in the part of the keyboard. So that's why he got those crazy bass solos and bass lines that you would hear with Townsend over the top. And Daltrey's analogy, or Roger's analogy in the Amazing Journey, is he used to think of it as Keith was like a ball of yarn, and John and Pete were the 2 knitting needles that would weave it together and make it into this amazing, tapestry, is what he said, I think.
Yeah.
I think I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, like when I was watching him play, right, when I was watching the documentaries, there was a scene that made me recall, like, a concert that I had gone to. But the scene was when they were recording one of the albums, he had to duct tape the headphones to his head.
Yeah.
Right. And that's that. And he's like, you just see his face like ferociously hitting those drums and like such energy. And it reminded me a lot of Darren King. And I don't know if you guys know who that is. But he won like Guitar Center's like drummer of the year like one time. And
okay, cool.
But he's the drummer for Mute Math, which is not like a very well known band. And I have heard of them, but I didn't think much of them. I like their music isn't that like spectacular in my opinion. And if there's any fans that listen to that, they're probably going to be like, oh,
shots fired.
Yeah, but they are probably the best live band I have ever seen, and it is because of their drummer. So their setup is that the drummer's to the right of the stage. Like if you're looking at the stage, he's on the right and up front. And when he got on stage, like people started like yelling and going crazy, and I'm like, why are they going crazy for this guy? I thought he was doing sound check. I'm like, what's the big deal? The dude sits down, puts on headphones, and duct tapes the headphones to his head, and then proceeds to just drum like a freaking freight train, like madman.
Yeah.
And now that I watched the Who documentary, I'm starting to wonder, like, if Keith Moon wasn't there, are we going to have like Lars from Metallica? Are we going to have Darren Kings? Are we going to have Travis Barkers from Blink-182? Are we going to have like these drummers that just like snap and go all out and are almost as entertaining, or even sometimes more entertaining to watch than the lead singer and the guitar players and bass players? And that might be more of a question for you, Pat.
I think you already hit the nail on the head. I mean, I was thinking about that. Like, when I was a kid, there was like a lot more of a streamline of press than there is now. So when I was a kid, in order to like learn about my favorite drummers and whatnot, I'd have to get like magazines. So I'd read interviews with like drummers from bands around then. But I was like trying to think about like, like modern day drum heroes for people, like rock and roll drummers. And I would say like maybe one of the last would be Travis Barker, because most people don't know a lot of drummers by name. But he would be one of the last of that era, I would say. Maybe the Rage Against the Machine drummer. I'm not positive on that. But Travis Barker, for some reason, transcended that. But for me, it's a little bit, deeper diving with my favorites. Like I like Flaming Lips, their drummer / multi-instrumentalist. He's amazing. Slater Kinney, their drummer's amazing. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's like a full-fledged like rock star drummer nowadays, like how it used to be.
Yeah.
A lot of drumming now is more just kind of like play like a drum machine.
Well, I think
no offense to current music, that's kind of how it is.
Well, I think, and you guys could probably correct me if I'm wrong, but I think playing music, like live music, is kind of like I wouldn't say a dying art form, because obviously there's like tons of schools that are still out there that teach kids to play live music and stuff like that. But it's not like how it was back in their day, because like I think when Roger was talking on the documentary, he said there was every block had its own skiffle band,
right,
in that town. And I think maybe growing up, I grew up in Chicago, and I grew up in like a really like poor part of Chicago. So there wasn't a lot of kids that had instruments and stuff like that. So it was easier for them to like learn how to rap, or like, create simple like beats just on like their desktop or something like that. Like, and when I mean desktop, I don't mean like computer. I mean like
right.
literally their desks with like a pencil and like, banging, out a little beat there. And, I think it's a dying art form, so it's kind of hard to find artists that are that good.
Right.
Yep. All right. I think.
Yeah, for sure.
I think a lot of like the good drummers, or at least the ones that I've noticed, are like funk drummers.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Questlove is an amazing modern, somewhat popular drummer, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
That would probably be one of the newer, like most current and newer ones. But he's been around again since like the 90s too.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean that's the thing is like, there seems to be a couple different schools of thought with that, where it's like you're known because you're like a technical drummer, You know what I mean? You're flashy, you're technical, you got all the extra little bells and whistles on your kit. You got the wind chimes, you got the rototoms, you got the China crash cymbal, and then you got your drummers who are like all about the groove. You know, I mean, there's good in all of that, and there's bad in all of that. But for me, it's like, you know, I'm always into the drummer who can just keep a good groove.
Right.
Like I love. No offense to the Who, yeah, it's like sacrilege to say on the Who podcast, but I love John Bonham too. You know what I mean? But he's not necessarily like a simple drummer, but it's like about the groove. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't know where I'm going with this.
No. And I'm glad you mentioned Bonham, because like I didn't know that they kind of knew each other. So who do you think played off of who?
I mean, the Who was around before Zeppelin was.
Okay, so Bonham learned from Moon.
It seems like Bonham was really into like big band drummers and whatnot, but they're both amazing in completely different ways.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I love both of them.
They're cool guys. All right, so since we're kind of talking about individual members too, like who's your favorite Who?
Go, Jake.
Oh, come on. That's tough. I kind of go back and forth. I like them all for different reasons. I think the one that is easiest for me to relate to would be Pete Townsend, being the guitar player. You know, he went to art school. I went to art school. You know, just when I read his autobiography and stuff like that, I just feel like he is the easiest for me to relate to in that sense. So I guess, gun to my head, I would pick Pete as my favorite.
So, yeah, I might have to agree with that. The thing is, for me, you know, I feel like specifically the rhythm section in that band is so unique.
Yeah.
And so amazing, specific. Like you can't underrate Entwistle at all. He's amazing. No. You can't underrate Moon at all. He's amazing. But yeah, I mean, like as far as Pete goes, you know, it's just like trying to hone in on, like, trying to make you feel something when you're listening. Try to make you relate to him when you're listening to the music, you know. And as a bratty teenager, I was kind of a Roger hater. Just all the weird fashion, all the footage of him from the 80s, just, you know, bare chest.
The 80s was rough on
curly hair. The 80s did bad things to a lot of good artists.
Yeah,
but
it really did.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it's hard to choose. I mean, I guess I would have to, gun to my head, say Keith, because he was my introduction to the band. So, yeah, let me just say Keith since, yeah, let's do that.
Drummer picks the legendary drummer. I feel that.
Yeah.
You know what? So watching it, I really, you know, looking at those personalities, right? Not, you know, I thought Keith was like a cool guy, and it's kind of hard to think of me hanging out with like a hardcore drug addict, alcoholic, you know, and stuff like that. Pete seems pretty depressed. You know, he has,
that is true.
He has a lot of angst.
He's a dark man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Roger seemed cool. He was a Cockney gangster. That's what they said that he was growing up.
Right.
But I think John was the glue of like the group. I really do, because he seemed like the most even keel guy.
Chill.
You know, definitely so chill. In his public image, he was the most chill, but you know, he was a bit of a hellraiser too. They say a lot of times when Keith was pulling pranks on people, John was not far behind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the way he went too was pretty rock and roll, you know.
Yes, very.
In bed with a stripper at the age of 57 in
Vegas.
Yeah,
what was it, cocaine or something overdose?
So, well, he died he died of heart disease.
Yeah.
Which was let on from smoking, but they did find cocaine in his system.
Can I tell a quick story?
Go for it.
So this is really selfish. Obviously, he had a family and friends and bandmates, but one of my biggest disappointments in my life was that tour where that happened, because that was like the first night of this 2002 tour, right?
Yes. Yeah, it was literally
So-
it was the morning that they were supposed to have the concert. That night, they found him that morning of the concert.
So yeah, so John also passed away 2002, in the middle of the night. So I got into the Who, I want to say like 99, 98, something like that. So I got really, really into them, and I was so into them, and they had just gotten back together like solidly in around that time, like 99, and started doing live shows again. So for me, once I finally got into them and got to a point where I could, like, actually look out for them to see them play a show, was this tour in 2002. And yeah, like, we had tickets to go see them at the Van Andel. And yeah, John also died like right at the beginning of that tour.
Yeah.
And I was devastated.
Yeah.
Devastated, because it's like, Keith Moon, like, was so brutal, and it took them forever to find a good replacement for him.
Yeah.
Which they finally did in the mid 90s, right? After 1978 when he passed away.
Right.
But then it's like, oh, well, can I swear on this podcast?
Yes. Yeah. No. Yeah.
I was like, well, fuck, man. this is this other irreplaceable member of this band. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No.
And it's like, how long is it going to take for them to adapt to replace him now? It's not going to feel the same. It's not going to be the same. It's like, well, fuck, I've never seen him before or whatever.
Yeah.
But I know it sounds so selfish right now. But I was so bummed out.
Let me tell you right now, I completely understand. And there's two things that I kick myself till this day about. And one of them is, now I did get to see him during Audio Slave, but Chris Cornell, I never got to see him in Soundgarden. And I actually left the festival a day early, and they were performing on the last day. And I was just like,
no.
I was just like, no
brutal.
big deal. And a month later, he passed away or killed himself.
Man. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also Chester, Linkin Park.
Oh, yep.
Not too far after. And I completely get it. I'm like, part of me is like, why'd they die? Because I really want to watch them live, but no, I can't. So I feel that.
That's for me. That's every time the Who is in town, I go. I have been to every Who show since the first one I went to was in 2006, and I have gone to see them on every tour since then that they come to Michigan. For that reason, it's like, I know it's not really the Who anymore. People joke and call it the Two because it's just Pete and Roger. But you never know when one of them's going to be gone. So I've always got to go see them.
That's true. And man, I'll tell you what, both of those guys to me are still so legendary, right?
Oh yeah.
Learning more about them, I thought it was crazy. I had no idea that they also ran around with Jimi Hendrix, and Jimi Hendrix stole the Destroying the Guitar from Pete.
Yeah, so Pete went on stage and destroyed his guitar. The Who got to go first. They rock, paper, scissors for who would go first. This was at the Monterey Pop Festival. And they wanted to go first because they wanted to be able to be like, hey, we destroyed our instruments. Don't worry about Hendrix. And he was so mad that they went first and destroyed their instruments and got all the attention. That's why he set his guitar on fire.
Yeah. But it's like one of those things, though. Like, art inspires art, man.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, who would have thought? Who would have thought that the most prolific guitar player of all time? Like I had no idea that he was inspired by the Who, or that that he was even on the same record label as them.
Yeah.
I that was just mind blowing to me. Kind of inspiring greatness, I guess.
Yeah, it's very cool. In fact, in Roger's autobiography, he alleges that the song Foxy Lady was inspired by Roger's now wife, the Hendrix song Foxy Lady, because she was working on that tour as like a promotional manager or something. And I guess, according to Roger, Hendrix had a big crush on her and she did not return his feelings.
Yeah, he wrote it about my wife too, Roger. Sure, Roger.
That is hilarious. And so is that what they called them, promotional managers back then?
That's what the kids called it back then.
Yeah. I think, have you guys watched the movie Almost Famous?
Absolutely.
Dude, great movie, right?
Yeah.
But like all the groupies, right? Like they had like titles, stuff like that, like to kind of hide the fact, or like justify the fact that they were paying for all these girl stuff. It's pretty funny. Yeah, but yeah, all one of the things also that I thought was interesting that inspired Peter was the Marababa.
Meher
Yeah.
Baba. Yeah.
Marababa, right? And that kind of and it was before he said that he got on acid, right? And he had a really bad trip. And then after that, he's like, I'm not going to touch it anymore. And then he started
Right.
following Marababa. And then after all that, and he said that the acid trip helped him and inspired him for certain things. But after all that happened, then Tommy came, the album Tommy, right? Do you guys think the fact that Marababa was like a guy that had a vow of silence and was a spiritual guru about like don't worry, be happy, which I thought was interesting. I thought that was from that one dude that made the song. It's actually a quote.
Bobby McFerrin or whatever. Yeah.
It's actually a Marababa quote. Don't worry, be happy. Do you think that maybe Tommy was inspired by that character being a mute, and then he just took it a step further?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's funny that you just mentioned Almost Famous too, because in Almost Famous, the album Tommy kind of plays a little bit of a pivotal role, if I remember correctly.
Really? I don't remember that, but refresh my memory if you do have more details on that.
Believe it's been a while since I've seen the movie, but isn't that the album his sister tells him to listen to?
Yeah, and that starts him on his whole path. Yeah, I remember.
She tells him
yeah,
to
they
listen
play.
to I think she says light a candle and listen to Tommy.
You know what's? This is another nerd moment for me. So I was in the movie theater watching that with my girlfriend in high school, and like when that album came up and that song came on, I like was visible. I was like so loud in the theater. She's like, shh. So I was like genuinely excited. I'm like, yeah. I listened to that when I was in 8th grade.
Oh yeah, and I think it's funny. At least in my life, I vividly recall when I made that transition from this is not your music, right? Because I had 2 older sisters, and I'm a first generation American, so my parents are immigrated to the U.S. So I'm listening to like Spanish music. I'm listening to a lot of R&B and hip hop because that's where I'm at. But I remember like the first time I listened to rock and roll, I was like, oh, this is not my sister's music. This is not my parents' music. This is my music.
Yeah.
Nice.
And Jake, I know you kind of said, like when you listened to Boris, the Spider, that was kind of like your aha moment. Like, this is so cool. And I think that's cool that you had parents that actually pushed you to make music your own. But Pat, what about you? Like, did you have a aha moment with music?
Well, I mean, like specifically, I started playing drums and I played along to a lot of alt rock stuff and a little bit of classic rock stuff. Like, I remember being really into John Bonham when I started on drums, and I had to put together my own drum set. We were poor. My parents couldn't afford to get me a kit, so I literally made a drum set out of garbage. Like, I had a cardboard box. I had like 2 like paper plates taped together with like dry macaroni in them. I had like a cookie tin with like beads in it. Like, all I had was drumsticks.
He still plays that kit today.
Yeah. It sounds pretty good when you compress it and put reverb and echo on it. Sound like one of the levee breaks. No, but for me, like, I also like have my own music where I write, and I like to do that too. Like, drumming is definitely fun, but it can be limiting. But I like to write stuff too. And for me, like, I mainly was influenced by mostly classic rock for songwriting, like the Beatles, The Who, Neil Young, Devo. Like, a lot of that stuff was like my bread and butter. Yeah, I mean, I do still love drumming, but there's nothing like trying to create something with like actual like melody and movement and just looking at a piece from the outside, like zooming out and looking at it. So for me, I guess that's why I picked up like guitar and other instruments and tried to start singing.
I feel that, man. I mean, I tried to become a musician. I don't have the rhythm for it. I still have a
Okay.
Fender guitar. Like, it's in the background. I don't know if you guys could see it.
Nice.
Oh,
Straight, yeah.
I say Fender, Squire, because I too was poor, but that's my very first guitar ever. Um, but
Squire's are good guitars. I've got 2 of them.
dude, I love
Hey,
them.
yeah, no hating on them now. Like literally, one of my favorite guitars is Jazzmaster, the J Master Jazzmaster Squire. It's an amazing guitar.
Oh yeah, like I've always wanted like either like a Jazzmaster Jaguar or a Mustang. Always wanted one of those. Who knows?
Nice.
Nice.
Maybe now that like I actually like can afford stuff, as an adult, maybe I'll indulge one of these days. Who knows?
Yeah.
But Jake, not that I know that I said that you already said like the Who and stuff like that. But was there like a specific song that like it just went from, oh, this is cool, this is fun, to wow, this is something else?
So Boris was definitely my introduction into the Who. I think the songs I latched onto a lot of songs, but the one I really specifically latched onto at first was Pinball Wizard from Tommy. And then my dad got me Tommy on CD for Christmas one year just because it was too hard to keep listening to his vinyl, and I think he was afraid I was going to damage it. And I remember I just listened to it all the way through, like 4 times in a row. It was ridiculous. It took all night. I didn't sleep. I think they would have been pissed if they had found out I just stayed up all night listening to Tommy over and over. So I think that Pinball Wizard is definitely kind of my aha moment, I would say.
I got you. I feel that. I had another question and it just like escaped me. It like ran away.
Should I answer that last
Yeah,
question?
go ahead.
So I would say like I wanted to say earlier like some recommendations for peeps for them would probably specifically be like live clips.
Oh yeah.
I got into Kids Are Alright initially, which is a bunch of like live performances and stuff, some studio stuff. But if you watch Amazing Journey / Sparks, any live version of that with Keith Moon is insane and amazing and transcendent. Just kind of how the song moves and changes, and just kind of how all the band interplay goes. And then yeah, just like my initial reaction to hearing like how great they sounded live on Kids Are Alright too. Not a lot of bands that were recorded back then or that played back then sounded that great live.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I think Live at Leeds is arguably the greatest live rock album ever recorded. And the tones and the sounds they get on that album are amazing. That was another one my dad was like, okay, you like Tommy, you got to listen to Live at Leeds. And actually, funny story, my dad, being a Who fan growing up, the vinyl he had me listen to of Live at Leeds was actually his second or third copy, because growing up he listened to it so many times he wore down the grooves in the vinyl and he couldn't listen to it anymore. So he'd have to go out and buy another
dad.
one.
So proud of you, Dan Gabbert.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. That you guys kind of shared that experience together. That's pretty cool.
Well, and it was awesome too, latching onto my dad's music, because whenever the Who came to town, he would buy tickets. So it's like, hey,
It's a good deal.
Actually, I got a pretty funny story about that. So, like my family, like I told you guys what they listened to. It was like R&B, hip hop, and like Latin music, right? And I love all that stuff too. I mean, don't get me wrong, but like if you tell me to go like to one of those concerts, I'll be like, okay, I'll go. But if you tell me we're gonna go to a rock concert, that's like a whole different energy level for me. And
I gotcha.
I took my sister and brother-in-law to an Emery and Hawthorne Heights concert, and I'm not sure if that's your guys' jam at all or not, but it's basically screamo, emo, hardcore music, right?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I don't think I've ever seen two people more shocked at a crowd than that. So it's nice that you had somebody that understood, like, you know, we're going to go to a rock concert. This is what it's going to be like. Let's go.
Yeah.
So I actually remembered what the question I was going to ask earlier, and I don't know why it escaped me. But is there a and if it's too much of a personal question, I mean, I understand, but don't worry. But is there a moment in your life
About 7.5 inches.
7.5 inches?
Jesus. 7 3/4.
7 3/4, just a 1/4 inch more now. All right. Is there a moment in your life that
Jesus.
you felt impacted, or like that it helped you in some way, like this music that you're so in love with?
Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going through like my first breakup in high school and listening to a lot of Quadrophenia, and I had previously not really gotten into that record. For some reason, I had seen like VH1 documentary, VH1 Legends was the series, right? About the Who are rock legends. That if you look that video up, the narrator's voice sounds like he chewed on gravel. but anyway, I remember watching that and being like, "Oh, this music is really weird and dark. I don't know if I ever really want to get into this record. I just want like the lighter other stuff." But I really got into Quadrophenia when I was dealing with that breakup, and just it was the perfect age to listen to that record. It's very, very specific to that time in my life and anybody's life. I think it's an important record to a lot of peeps who got into it in their teens.
Yeah.
But you can relate to it. And I just remember listening to that record and just, being really into it. And it, kind of got me through a bit, I guess. I just remember listening to that a lot. But other than that, yeah, just kind of like, it's just all once in a while get like one of their live bootlegs with Keith and John and everybody in tow. Like there's some good stuff from 75 that you can get where, there's still some earlier things in there and it hasn't gotten too weird with the 80s stuff yet.
I know,
and
Pat, you and I have talked about this before, but I think we both agree that 1975 was like the peak of the Who's live tone.
Yeah, this is really nerdy. Of course, you came to us for this, though, right?
Dive into
but yeah,
it,
if you're looking to check it out, I mean, just because there's varying quality like of who's recording and what they're recording with at these live shows, and the Who specifically restricted people from recording them on probably what would have been their best tour, which would be like, the Who's Next tour.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of stuff that you can get from that era. So the second best would be their Who by Numbers tour, which is like 75, 76, and that's before Keith kind of started going downhill with his health, So yeah, I mean, that's like my bread and butter, like the guitar and the bass tones. Just, it's amazing. Mm-hmm. So if you really want like a good record of them, I would go from around that time period and then just kind of do some of the Kids Are Alright stuff too.
Awesome, thanks, Pat. And Jake, you didn't escape the question unless you really wanted to.
No, I wasn't trying to get out of it. I mean, I don't have any specific instances. Hang on, there is for those who want to get into the Who from 75, like we were talking about, they did have a concert film, the Who Live in Texas, 1975. I couldn't remember where it was, so if anybody wants to check that out, it's pretty good. No, I don't have any specific instances of that I can recall of them helping me, but I remember just being like I was a very angry teenager, and the Who were angry teenagers too, so it felt nice to be able to listen to their music and just have someone I could relate to, and it's like, they went through this too, obviously, when you listen. And that just always made me feel better. The Who is just like, I don't know, it sounds dumb, but it just felt like something I could always turn to, to listen. Made me feel better.
I mean, I completely understand. It's not the Who for me, but I have a handful of bands that like, it's kind of counterintuitive because you could be feeling really crappy one day, right? Like really down.
Yeah.
And then you listen to the most angstiest, angriest thing you could think of, and you feel better.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. So I mean, I completely get that. And one of the songs like from them that like really, till this day, like I didn't even know it was a Who song until like years after I had heard it. But there's a movie with Adam Sandler and Don Cheadle called Rain on Me.
Yeah.
Right. And then Love Rain on Me, it was covered by Pearl Jam on that album.
Yep.
And then later on, just because I liked the song so much, like I found out that it was a Who song too, and you know I listened to both versions, and honestly, I think I do like the Who version better than the Pearl Jam version, even though they're both really good. But like the raw emotion from that song, like it's one of those like if you have a bad day and you hear that song, it hits.
Yeah. I actually read that Townsend had intended for that song to be a gentle ballad, and Roger did not agree and recorded the vocals the way we know them, where it's just like that raw, powerful emotion. And Townsend listened to it and said, okay, fine.
I love the ending of that song. It's so epic. Like, there's like a really drawn out like drum roll going on, and then you just like the giant last note hit at the very, very end. But I was going to say, too, there's another VH1 thing that came out in the mid-aughts. It's like a tribute to The Who.
It's the Rock Honors The Who, is what it was called.
Yeah. And you reminded me of this because there's Pearl Jam does like 2 Quadrophenia songs, and they do Love Rain or Me, but they do it with like a full orchestra. Mm-hmm. So all those like synthesized parts that are on the record are all like actual strings, and it's an amazing performance, man. You'd love it. You should check it out.
I am gonna check it out. Like probably as soon as we're done with the episode, I'll probably go and check it out. I'm not gonna lie.
I think you can find the whole thing on YouTube. It was a lot of bands doing tributes to The Who. I know.
The Flaming Lips one was great. They did a Tommy medley.
Adam
it was
Sandler
great.
wrote a song about The Who to the tune of Magic Bus, but he like sings about each of the members of the band. So, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I think The Who is the band that he was listening to in that one movie. Like the one that I mentioned earlier, Rain on Me. It's like he's like really depressed.
Yeah.
He always has headphones on because like he doesn't want to think of anything. I'm pretty sure The Who was the band that he was listening to on that.
I don't know.
That makes sense. Yeah, I haven't seen that movie, but that would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Like I said, man, their stuff is all over media. And,
oh yeah.
Yeah. I just.
So actually, we're talking about Love Rain Over Me. Townsend wrote. I know he wrote some of the songs in Quadrophenia based on experiences he had while he was in the Sea Scouts when he was young. And fast forward a bit, I'm trying not to make this like a ridiculously long story because there's so many working parts. But long story short, when I became an Eagle Scout, my parents wrote to Pete Townsend because they knew he was a hero of mine. And he wrote back to congratulate me on becoming an Eagle Scout. And at the bottom, he signed it, Pete Townsend, and then in parentheses, he wrote ex-Sea Scout. So I just thought that was kind of cool that I had a little bit of a connection to that.
That is dope. Do you have that frame somewhere? And
I do. It's not in
Pete
a
Townsend
frame.
prayers to it.
Obviously, of course I do. It's not currently.
I feel
framed,
like I've definitely seen that.
Yeah, I know I've showed it to you. I've got it in a binder for safekeeping right now. We just moved a few months ago, and I haven't unpacked everything. But it's going on the wall.
He texts it to me every night before bed.
Good night, Pete.
My name's Pat.
Oh, sorry.
You just be like, I just want to remind you I have this.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Jake.
You're welcome.
No, that is pretty cool, and that I think that when you meet your heroes and like something cool like that happens, that's always. Well, I know you didn't meet him, but like the fact that he wrote back is freaking phenomenal.
That alone was a really cool connection. Just like seeing his signature on the page, and like you can look and you can see it's actually like indented. It's not just a photocopy. Like he actually wrote it in, I think, blue pen. So it's pretty neat to see.
Very cool, man. I'm a little jealous. I'm not gonna lie on that one. Yeah. So Peter Townsend obviously kind of like the genius. I mean, they were all geniuses in their own right? But when it came to the songwriting and all that stuff, Pete Townsend is obviously the genius behind a lot of what made the Who.
Right.
And he was a very tortured and dark person, and like growing up on post World War II, UK, everything being bombed and stuff like that. That must have made quite an impression as a kid.
Right. Plus, he had some child abuse too.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's interesting, right? He was abused as a child. Later on in life, he was accused of being a pedophile, right? Mm-hmm. And obviously that,
like 96, 97.
Yeah, that ended up being false. But I thought it was interesting that they would even try to say that he was that when he spoke so adamantly against it. But that song with Uncle
Ernie
from Tommy is a very unsettling song.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah, that definitely harkens back to that part of his childhood, which in fact, I think he didn't write that song. I think he had John write it because he was struggling with it so much. He was bringing up too many bad memories. So John kind of took over the writing on that one.
Seems like a weird, like, you'd think somebody would step in and during the recording and be like, maybe no.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. But I know he also wrote the song A Quick One, he said, is kind of based on that experience too. Different parts of that experience, which was like their mini opera, A Quick One, while he's away. Because with Pete, he lived with his parents and everything was great and everything was happy and they were wonderful to him. But then they had to go away for like a year or so and he had to live with his grandmother. And that's when the abuse happened, was when he was living with his grandmother. So then when his parents came back and he went back to live with his parents, his life was good again. So in A Quick One, the analogy he's making is that when the boyfriend leaves and she's left with the engine driver, although this was, not a consent issue, but still when she was with the engine driver, Ivor, that was kind of like symbolic of when he was left with his grandma. And then when the boyfriend comes back, that was kind of symbolic of when his parents came back.
Gotcha. And I do remember him saying that his grandma was absolutely nuts. She said that she was a crazy person, and didn't know that.
And she would bring a lot of crazy guys around who she would introduce to Pete as, this is your uncle, and then bad things would happen.
Woof.
Yeah, but that's why Uncle
terrible.
Ernie.
Yeah, did not make that connection. Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But kind of where I was going with that was, do you guys think, like, for a lot of like these genius artists, a lot of them seem to have pretty checkered past. Do you guys think that that's almost like kind of a requirement for some of these like musical geniuses to kind of like have some sort of internal struggle and like bring it out, and that's what people connect with? Or
I don't know that it's a requirement, but it definitely seems when you have that background of drama, I don't mean drama like you're an actor. I mean, when you have that some sort of drama in your past, it definitely seems to affect songwriting, and performance and being in touch with certain emotions that other people maybe are not in touch with.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just thinking about like my favorite artists or bands or whatever, and then their sort of upbringing and things like that, and I almost feel like maybe yes, there has to be something, because I'm thinking about John Lennon. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about Devo, like they were there, like Kent State shootings, like when the military just gunned people down at Kent State. Yeah. I'm thinking about Pete Townsend, obviously.
Yeah. I should
think of all these like groups
really
that
quick.
I love.
Earlier when I said I related to Pete, I didn't mean I had a great childhood, okay?
I didn't. Don't worry, I didn't think that at all.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
I think it's funny that you're clarifying, but
yeah, but yeah, Roger grew up, in the in the war. I mean, they all grew up in the war, but then Roger had to like go be a sheet metal worker, and he got kicked out of school, and all kinds of stuff. And Keith, had a bunch of weird things going on in his childhood. They think now he was undiagnosed ADHD and probably also bipolar, or as it used to be called, manic depressive. So yeah, it seems like that seems to be a common thing with these legends, that they all had a screw loose in a good way.
I will say, Paul McCartney seems like he's got his shit together, right?
True.
And he's pretty successful.
He's epic. I don't.
And then there's.
I was gonna say
ahead,
I don't
sorry.
know of any controversy with Paul McCartney.
Well,
He seems like a pretty simple guy. He's got a nice life.
don't forget, it's not actually Paul. Paul died back in the 60s, and then they brought in a double to replace him. Remember that whole thing?
I died years ago, mate.
Oh my god. I don't know why it's just thought of this, but one of the Paul McCartney comments that triggered me is when he did that song with Rihanna and Kanye West, and they're like, I don't know who this Paul guy is, but he's really gonna blow up.
I remember seeing that in the news at the time. Oh, jeez, that hurt.
Oh man,
just like an arrow to the chest.
Right. But yeah. Okay, so I have another tough question for you guys.
Yeah.
If you were going to go in outer space and could only take one Who record with you on the long journey to Mars or wherever we're going to call it,
Amazing Journey.
The Amazing Journey. Nice.
Which
nicely
album would
done,
it be?
Pat? And we're excluding greatest hits. It has to be just like a, no compilation albums, just a regular, straightforward studio release.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it can't be the Who collection.
Right, yeah. The maximum R&B,
iTunes Essentials.
the maximum R&B from the 90s that has every single track they ever recorded.
Yeah.
Radio jingles and everything.
Yeah. Oh shoot, that is tough. See, I get torn because Tommy was kind of my intro into the Who. And it holds a special place in my heart. But if I had to pick an album that would go into space, just one album, I think I would pick Who's Next from 1971.
Respect.
You know what? I might have to go with the one that Jake got into the Who on, and Meaty Beaty Big and Bouncy, because it's all the classic stuff. It spans the whole thing. Does that count as greatest hits, though? It's not billed as greatest hits.
That was so Meaty Beaty Big and Bouncy, while it wasn't greatest hits, it was just called a compilation album. It came out also in 71, but it was...
Okay, so is that a no-no?
But it was comprised of songs
you guys
from
are the
the
judges.
60s. So, I mean, I would let you bring it.
What do you think, boss?
Yeah, I'll allow it. Why not? Yeah.
Sweet, thanks. That's the one.
All right, awesome.
So, and for the record, people always wonder what the title Meaty Beaty Big and Bouncy means. And John put the compilation together, and John came up with the name. It was a representation of each member of the Who. So Meaty was Roger, because he was always super ripped and muscular. Beaty was Keith, because of the way he would beat on the drums. Big was John, because he was the tallest guy in the group. He was like 6'2" or something, and they used to call him the Ox. And Bouncy was Pete, because the way he used to bounce around the stage and he was playing guitar. So Meaty Beaty, Big, and Bouncy.
That's funny. I think it's... So this is probably a good segue, because we're talking about the four personalities of the band. I think it's interesting that they're kind of frenemies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that's part of what made them have such an amazing stage presence and sound, is the fact that they weren't best friends. I think that's where some of that anger behind their tone came from, was they were kind of angry at each other. But despite that, they knew they were making good music, so they would work through it. Yeah, no,
I get you. And I think one of the funniest things, at least when I was watching the documentaries, is that Roger's like, "Oh, I I gotta back down. You know, those three were like the geniuses, and I'm like, I'm the singer, even though I think he's a phenomenal singer. Like,
oh yeah,
like I love the tone of his voice, and I think it's probably like understated or undervalued how great of a singer he is, in my opinion. But I think it's funny that even though he's the one that was like supposedly backing down, he's the one that probably kicked everybody's ass. Like, I don't think he ever lost any of the fights.
So that was actually
like.
The reasoning behind his backing down was he beat the crap out of all of them once because they all got super high before a show, and then the show sounded like crap. And Roger wouldn't do drugs before they went on stage. So he beat them all up, and he flushed all their drugs, and they kicked him out of the band. And like 2 weeks later, they begged him to come back, but they told him you can only come back if you don't do that anymore. So then from then on, he would try his hardest to back down.
They still got into fights, though.
Oh,
yeah. It's like a weird dynamic. It's specifically Roger and Pete, it seems like. Just always, even in the press and stuff, just... But it makes you wonder, was this like the precursor to like the Oasis brothers? You know? Like, here's a theory I have, okay? And bear with me. I'm a nerd, obviously. But with the Who, like, part of it, yes, obviously was like their talent and Pete's songwriting. But I feel like they specifically made events in order for themselves to become famous. Like blowing shit up on TV, driving things into swimming pools. Like they made that shit happen, but they also were smart to make other things happen. And I almost feel like with the Who, like there's a lot of weird shit with that band where they specifically do things in order to get attention. And I want to say maybe that was started by Kit Lambert, like their early management maybe got them into doing that kind of shit.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
I definitely agree with you, like on their management. They seemed like they were pretty smart guys, even though they were like also like had their issues on drugs and stuff like that. But my only argument against you on that one is I don't know if Keith Moon was planning anything ever.
No. I mean, maybe not that, but you know what I mean. Like, no, you're right. But some of it, it's like, you wonder.
Yeah. I don't think, like, looking at personalities and you're like, oh, who would I want to hang out with, right? I don't know if I would want to be lifelong friends with that guy, but I think it would be fun as hell to have one night with Keith Moon. Like, in his
I know there's a famous Joe Walsh quote where he said, the scariest thing that ever happened to me was that Keith Moon decided he liked me. And they were really good friends, but some of the most scary and terrifying things that happened to Joe Walsh in his life were because of Keith Moon.
There's like a bunch of like Keith Moon stories you'll hear. My wife Christy and I, we were on like a YouTube wormhole like a couple weeks ago, and we saw like a Daltrey interview on Howard Stern.
Oh yeah.
So he asked, obviously Howard Stern's got to ask him about all the gossipy or whatever, the juicy stuff. But yeah, he was just talking about Keith Moon, however many years later. And Daltrey's just trying to describe what it was like to be around this guy, this person, this unique individual. And one of the most amazing things he was talking about was just being at like a hotel somewhere or like some room. It was like a pretty big room, and there was like a window unit air conditioner. So, when you're inside, you can see like whatever part of the window unit air conditioner. He said that he remembers like seeing Keith Moon drinking a cocktail and like doing a jig on like air conditioner, like in a window or whatever. That's just like however many feet high.
He said they were on the 10th floor.
He's literally like, like tempting fate like 24/7. It's so insane. Like I don't even know how, but it's like it fueled his musicianship. Like just no net, just go, right?
Bro, that man was fueled on rocket fuel.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the famous incident with Keith where he took a bunch of horse tranquilizers before the show and passed out on the drum set in the middle of the show. And that's the famous thing where Pete got up to the mic and said, "Can anybody play the drums?" And they had to bring a guy up.
Can anybody play the drums?
They had to bring a guy up out of the audience to finish the set.
And didn't the guys?
And the Who was big at the time. This was like they were playing a stadium. You know.
It's a good they had somebody in the crowd knew how to drum. And I think
Yeah.
the guy said that to the Who's credit, they must have incredible stamina because he played 3 songs with them, and like he was worn out. Which there's a John Entwistle quote where he said, "The Beatles might make better melodies than we do, but we'll blow them off the stage."
Yep.
Yeah.
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 Well, that was actually so the famous Beatles song "Helter Skelter." Paul McCartney wrote that song because he knew the new Who album was coming out, which had the song "I Can See for Miles" on it, and he was afraid that that was going to be the new big heavy sound and that the Beatles weren't going to be able to keep up. So Paul wrote Helter Skelter specifically trying to compete with the Who.
Yeah. The version of that I heard was, like Pete was in an interview saying they're making the most raunchy or rockin' recording ever. And then Paul's like, however, now we've got to do it, boys. Come on, boys. 6-string bass with fuzz on it.
Pat, that is a spot-on Paul McCartney impression.
It is. It's really impressive.
All right. So one question that I love to ask, like at the end of each one of these shows that I do, is now the Who, British pop and all that stuff, obviously changed the world. And stuff like that. But I still like asking this question, even though the answer is obvious. Do you guys think music can change the world?
Oh, yeah. 100%. 150%.
Elaborate, please.
I mean, just from the way it has... Oh, man, I don't even know where to begin. Music makes people feel a certain way and act a certain way. And even if it only changes things a little bit, it's still a change, But you hear about back during Vietnam, all of the protest songs and everything that really helped unite people that were protesting this war. If it wasn't for those songs, the protests wouldn't have been nearly as powerful, And that's just one very small example. There's lots of different ways the world has changed. Elvis, look at Elvis when he got on TV and was shaking his hips and everything. If he hadn't have done that, the world would be completely different now. And the same goes for when the Beatles first came to America, the British invasion, like you mentioned. And the problem is I can't say exactly how it would be because it's not something I can fathom. The way the world is now it's hard for me to picture anything other than what we have. Does that make sense? Or am I just rambling?
No, I get it, and I love the fact that you talked about the Vietnam War and like the protests, because that was the example I used on the first podcast, and I think we need a little bit more of that unity nowadays. We're so divided and divisive. I would love for a music movement to start uniting us again. But Pat, what do you think?
Yeah. I think music can change your world, your own specific sphere and your own world. I was talking to somebody about my wedding, and my wife and I kind of had a wedding that was a little bit non-traditional.
It was awesome, though.
We're not in thanks, brother. We're not super traditional religious people, but I said something to a friend. I was like, music is my religion. I never really was a religious guy. I never really felt a whole lot in church. But, when you go to see a live concert, you go see a live show, you're in a room with people who all feel something or something similar in regards to that group or a song that group plays or whatever energy that group is putting out. So for me, that's like my church. That's like my congregation. And, nobody's going to go and bomb a country because of a band.
Right.
That's a beautiful
that being said, Pat,
yeah, you know what I mean?
That being said,
so like
the Charles Manson.
So for me, it's like there's not really a negative, for me, and even just like my personal life. Like I literally am friends with Jake, and we did music together. Yeah. He helped me make a bunch of music videos, and we're just friends. just because we both like The Who.
Yeah.
And it's like stuff like that, and even just like people I know they're playing music in GR. You know, it's like a completely separate, weird little family of people that I know that I would have not otherwise, because, you know, I can be like a weirdo, like a hermit sometimes, you know. So, you know, right now YouTube and, you know, the internet is amazing and great thing for me, because I can watch live clips, I can listen to live music. Like, one of my all-time favorite things is live music. So right now, it's a bummer that we can't do those things and see those things and be with people. But at the same time, you know, it is nice, I guess, to have whatever things to watch or listen to in the meantime. But I really miss playing shows, and I miss seeing shows.
Yeah.
Because it's an experience that's not like anything else. And it's crazy, too, specifically with, like, bands like The Who or whoever else. I mean, it's even... My dad was telling me one time, it's like, even, it was so much crazier back then. The amount of things that could go wrong before a band even arrived or played at a show, or how things would just get, like, derailed by the weirdest, most random things. Like, you wouldn't know if all the bands that are on the bill were going to show up. You know what I mean? You didn't know what state they were going to be in. It was just fucking... It's like Wild West.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like Wild West back then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if you can go and see a band and they're super tight and you saw it with somebody else, like, you remember that great show? That was such a great show. And it's like all the stars are aligning. All the pieces in the machine are working on all the cylinders. It's an amazing thing to witness, you know?
No,
Yeah.
I completely feel that, because half of my favorite memories are probably being at shows. You know, you're being at a festival and you've been standing for 7 hours, and, you know, you've been holding off going to the bathroom because, you know, you got a really good spot, and then all of a sudden the band comes, and, like, it just changes that moment. You're from like irritated, miserable, standing in the crowd to, like, you know, everybody's chanting, singing the same thing, and I get that, man. It's a wonderful sentiment that you shared. So thank you for that. So we've been at this for a while now, and so I want to thank you both for doing this, for taking the time, and for kind of bringing me into the Who world. Also, your music and stuff like that, I'm going to link that in the description. So anybody who wants to check out Jake and Pat's music, I was pleasantly surprised to be like, hey, you know, like, you guys gained, if nothing else, you guys gained one fan, because I am going to listen to
awesome,
especially Tokyo Morose. Is that, did I say that right?
Yeah.
I really like, I listened to like 4 or 5 of the songs from that. I know that was a while ago, but I really digged it. It was really good. So like definitely gonna listen to that a little bit more. But one thing that I do to end the show is I'm gonna kind of put some pressure on you guys. Words of wisdom, or like a funny like ender, like whatever you want to do.
Oh man.
I know, I'm so mean.
Gotta think. No, it's fine. I just gotta think. Pat, you go first.
Have a good time all the time.
Perfect. Have a good time all the time, people.
I guess I would say, oh shoot, what would I say?
Man, it could even be a Who lyric.
Oh yeah, there you go. I would say, long live rock.
Long live rock.
Yeah, there you go.
Hell yeah. All right, guys. Well, I thank you so much, and that's it. It's a wrap.
Thanks for having us, man.